"Mr. Easton, your blood pressure is dangerously high, and you're showing neurological symptoms. You need to go to the hospital now." The words came not from a doctor, nor from a colleague. They came from a woman in a Navy uniform, holding a cleaning cloth and a spray bottle. Benjamin Easton, CEO of Easton Biologics and one of the most powerful men in the pharmaceutical world, turned slowly toward the voice. His phone was still in his hand, mid-rant. His pupils were uneven, his hand trembling. But it wasn't the symptoms that stunned him, it was who had spoken. He looked at her like she had spoken in a foreign language. "Medical advice? From you?" he scoffed. "Remind me again, what's your degree in?" "Advanced sanitation." He laughed dryly, dismissively, and returned to his phone call, waving her off like a fly. But Nora Campbell didn't flinch. She didn't stutter. She didn't lower her gaze. She simply kept watching, calmly, carefully, clinically. Because Nora Campbell was not just a janitor. For 18 years, she had been a registered nurse. She had walked hospital floors at 3 a.m., held the hands of dying patients, trained junior staff, calmed panicked mothers, and stayed long after the end of her shift because someone needed help. Until one day, she spoke up. She saw the pattern: black patients receiving lower doses of medication for the same conditions as white patients. Their pain dismissed. Their symptoms minimized. So, she documented. She filed reports. She spoke in meetings where no one wanted to listen. And for that, she was erased. A fabricated medication error. A closed-door review. A revoked license. 18 years of service destroyed in 6 months. Now, she scrubbed toilets in the office of a man who didn't know she once taught medical interns how to recognize early signs of stroke. He didn't know that she'd been watching him for weeks. The moments when his coordination slipped. The hesitation in his speech. The time he forgot what day it was, mid-meeting. The subtle signs everyone else missed, or chose to ignore. She noticed them all. And now, standing there with cleaning supplies in her hand and years of medical knowledge in her mind, she had dared to speak. But Benjamin Easton didn't listen. "Next time you have a brilliant medical insight," he muttered, loosening his tie, "remember I pay the top doctors in the country. I don't need opinions from people who clean floors for a living." That was the moment he sealed his fate. Because what Benjamin Easton didn't know was that Nora had already begun to document everything. Quietly. Methodically. Like a nurse does when she knows the signs are being ignored. She went home that night and opened a small notebook. Inside, she wrote, "August 7th, left-hand tremor, visible during video call. August 9th, word confusion, delayed verbal response. August 12th, uneven pupil dilation." Every symptom, every pattern, every mistake he refused to see. She wasn't just cleaning. She was watching, diagnosing, preparing. Benjamin thought he ruled the 42nd floor, that every person in that glass tower answered to him. But the woman sweeping outside his door held a secret, one that could save his life, if only he stopped long enough to listen. And she had no intention of letting arrogance kill a man she could still save. Not because he deserved it, but because some oaths, once taken, are never broken. Not even for those who treat you like you don't exist. She arrived at the building every morning before the sun touched the glass. The 42nd floor always smelled like ambition. Filtered air, polished wood, the bitter trace of a boardroom espresso shot. It was where billion-dollar decisions were made behind mirrored doors. Where no one knew her name. Nora Campbell. Uniform, navy blue, standard issue. Role, custodial services. Visibility? None. She was the woman who entered after meetings ended. The one who wiped down untouched coffee cups. Who emptied wastebaskets filled with scribbled notes and crumpled pride. She moved silently, efficiently, like a shadow. No one asked where she came from. No one cared. And that was exactly how they wanted it. But what they didn't know, what not a single executive in Easton Biologics imagined, was that the woman pushing the cleaning cart through their corridors had once worn a white coat. That she had stood for 18 years inside hospital rooms, whispering calm into the ears of patients on the edge of panic. That she had trained interns, coordinated crash responses, written reports with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Until the day she stopped being useful. The day she spoke the truth. 5 years earlier, Nora Campbell had stood in front of a panel of medical administrators at Brooklyn General Hospital, holding a binder in her hands. 218 pages of data, logs, and case summaries. She had uncovered something ugly. Something systematic. Black patients, same symptoms, same vitals, same complaints, were receiving consistently lower doses of pain medication than white patients. They were more often flagged as drug-seeking, more often ignored, more often discharged with nothing but instructions to rest and hydrate. She had filed complaints. Nothing happened. So she presented her findings publicly, in a staff meeting. And within a month, they found an error in her medication records. A patient note that had mysteriously disappeared from the system. Allegations of protocol violation. Emotional instability. License revoked. Career gone. From nurse in charge to janitor. From advocate to ghost. Back in the present, Nora stood by the glass wall of the CEO's office. Benjamin Easton, 56, billionaire founder of Easton Biologics, was pacing behind his desk, barking into a phone call. His voice echoed off the floor-to-ceiling windows, all steel and glass and unchecked power. "I don't care what the FDA said," he snapped. "We launch next quarter, regulatory delays be damned. You hear me?" His hand trembled. His left eye blinked unevenly. He clutched the edge of the desk for a split second, long enough for Nora to notice. She said nothing. Not yet. It was 3 days later when it happened again. He was walking into the elevator, phone in hand, tie slightly loosened, when he lost his balance. Not dramatically, just a quick lurch, like the floor had shifted under him. Nora was cleaning the lobby floor at the time. Their eyes met for half a second. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked gently. He blinked at her, confused, then irritated. "I'm fine. Don't talk to me while I'm on a call." The doors closed between them. But his voice had slurred slightly, and his hand, still shaking. Nora waited. She documented. Not on a clipboard, not in a hospital chart. In a notebook she kept hidden inside her locker. August 2 to 7:42 a.m. Momentary instability in gait. Slight loss of balance. August 3 to 9:13 a.m. Left hand tremor, visible while holding phone. Pupil dilation uneven. August 5 to 3:17 p.m. Delay in verbal response during hallway interaction. Possible cognitive interruption. She wrote in silence. Because when the world has already decided you're not credible, sometimes the best you can do is prepare for the moment when you finally are. On August 6th, Benjamin had a video meeting with international investors. Nora was in the corner of the room, wiping the windows with slow, circular motions. She wasn't watching him. She was diagnosing. 3 times he repeated the same sentence. He confused one executive with another. And when he ended the meeting, he stood up too fast, and had to catch himself on the arm of the chair. The executives chuckled awkwardly. Jet lag, one muttered. Ben's been burning the candle, another joked. But Nora saw the truth in the way his fingers twitched against the tabletop. Later that evening, she finally broke her silence. She found him in his office, alone, just past sunset. His tie was off. His face was red. He looked, not like a CEO. Not like a man in control. "Mr. Easton," she said softly, "you're showing signs of something serious. Neurological. You need to get checked. Please." He stared at her. It wasn't just surprise, it was disbelief, indignation. She could almost see the thoughts forming behind his eyes. You're giving me medical advice now?" he asked with a smirk. "Remind me again, what's your degree in?" "Advanced sanitation." She didn't respond. Just stood there. Steady. He laughed to himself and reached for his phone. "Next time you have a brilliant medical insight, keep it to yourself. I pay some of the top physicians in the country. I don't need the opinion of someone who wipes desks for a living." He didn't even look up as he said it. Just waved his hand dismissively. Nora turned and walked away. But she didn't stop watching. She never stopped watching. Because she'd seen it before. The subtle unraveling. The slow burn of something deadly, masked as stress, dismissed as aging. She had saved lives once. And whether or not they called her nurse again, she would save another. Even if he never saw her. Even if he never thanked her. Because some oaths, once taken, are never broken. Not even in silence. Not even when no one is listening. The symptoms didn't go away. They deepened. And still, no one noticed. No one but her. Each day, Nora Campbell moved through the tower like a silent witness to a tragedy no one was willing to name. Benjamin Easton, once so controlled, so invincible, was beginning to slip, and the building around him refused to see it. Or worse. They saw it and chose to look away. On August 10th, during an executive lunch, Benjamin forgot the name of his CFO. He didn't stutter. He didn't fumble. He looked directly at the man, Jared Kim, someone who'd been by his side for 15 years, and called him Jason. Twice. No one corrected him. Later, in the hallway, Jared whispered to another director. "He's under a lot of pressure. It's just fatigue." Fatigue. That was the word they'd keep using. Fatigue doesn't cause cognitive disorientation. It doesn't twist your handwriting. It doesn't make your eyes dilate unevenly. But Nora knew better than to argue. She knew the price of speaking up too soon. So she kept recording. August 10 to 2:36 p.m. Memory slip, name confusion. Facial pallor. Unsteady balance on left side. August 11 to 6:52 a.m. Repetitive speech noted in lobby interaction. Initial vocal delay. The notebook in her locker was filling fast. And still, he mocked her when they crossed paths. "Don't overthink the trash, Nora," he'd say with a smirk. It's not a diagnostic challenge. Sometimes he wouldn't acknowledge her at all. Just walked past as if she were a coat rack. But she watched the way he touched the wall to steady himself. The way he blinked more than usual, as if trying to recalibrate the world. The signs were stacking. The clock was ticking. That week, Nora stepped outside during her break and saw an elderly woman struggling to cross the street near the parking garage. The woman had a cane, a cautious step, and a smile that masked pain. Nora moved toward her instinctively, hand under elbow, gait stabilized, voice low and reassuring. It took only 2 minutes to help her reach the curb. "Thank you, dear," the woman said. "You've done that before." Nora smiled faintly. Old habits. From a few steps away, another woman watched the whole scene. She was tall, silver-haired, with posture that suggested a lifetime of earned authority. She approached Nora calmly. "You were a nurse," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. Nora hesitated. "For 18 years. Still are," the woman said. "I'm Dr. Mariah Clark. Neurologist. Retired, mostly. I consult here twice a week." Nora's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. They sat on a bench. Two women, one stripped of title, the other weathered by time, speaking a language only the experienced know. Nora described the symptoms. She never mentioned Benjamin's name, but the profile was unmistakable. Dr. Clark listened without interruption. "Have you documented it?" she asked. Nora handed her a copy of select entries from the notebook. "Not all of it. Just enough to reveal the pattern." When Dr. Clark finished reading, she closed the folder slowly. "This man should have had a full neurological evaluation weeks ago." "I know. What do you suspect?" "Aneurysm," Nora said. "Or early-onset degenerative disease." "Maybe both." Dr. Clark nodded. "That's exactly what I was thinking." And just like that, Nora wasn't alone anymore. That night, in the quiet of her apartment, Nora did something she hadn't done in years. She opened her laptop and began writing. Not a report, not a journal. A letter. A letter addressed to Helen Easton. She had studied the woman from afar. Helen wasn't just the CEO's wife. She was a trained nurse who had stepped away from practice years ago when the family's wealth ballooned. She was quiet, poised, rarely seen, but never unobservant. Nora believed Helen would understand. The letter was meticulous. No embellishment. No anger. Just clinical precision. It outlined every symptom in sequence. It included references to possible diagnoses. It listed risks, next steps, and the urgency of a specialist evaluation. But it said none of the obvious things. It never said, "Your husband is dying." It said, instead, "If left untreated, the window will close. And when it does, it may never reopen." She printed it. Folded it carefully. No signature. Just the facts. And a quiet hope. 3 days later, Helen Easton opened the letter over coffee in her sunlit kitchen. She read it once. Then again. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. She reached for her phone and called her daughter, Rebecca, a final-year medical student at Johns Hopkins. "Becca," she said, "I need you to come home. Now." The next day, Helen walked into Benjamin's home office. He was working late, red-eyed and unfocused. She waited until he looked up. "I scheduled a meeting for Saturday," she said calmly. "A family succession review. Just you, me, the board, and a friend of mine. Dr. Mariah Clark." Benjamin frowned. "What succession? I'm fine." She stepped closer. "No, Ben. You're not." He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Just silence. Helen didn't push. She simply turned and walked away. Because for the first time, she wasn't going to wait for him to see her truth. She was going to force him to face it. And somewhere on the 42nd floor, Nora Campbell continued her rounds. Mop in hand, notebook in locker, conviction in her spine. She didn't know how it would unfold. But she knew what she had done. She had spoken, quietly. She had observed, completely. She had told the truth. Now it was time for them to hear it. whether they wanted to or not. Saturday came with the sharp stillness that only a reckoning brings. The Easton estate in Westchester sat atop the hills like a fortress, tall, cold, and proud. That morning, it was filled with executives dressed in designer suits and expensive silence. They believed they were attending a family meeting on corporate succession planning. What they didn't know was that they were walking into an intervention. Helen Easton had orchestrated everything with the precision of the nurse she once was. She had invited only those who mattered most to Benjamin, his inner circle, his board confidants, his daughter Rebecca, and one unfamiliar name on the list, Dr. Mariah Clark. Benjamin walked into the great hall slowly. Not because he meant to, but because his balance was off. He tried to hide it with measured steps. He adjusted his cufflinks. His tie knot was loose for the third time in an hour. He looked tired. But worse, he looked uncertain. Something Benjamin Easton never allowed himself to be. "Why are we discussing succession?" he asked, forcing a smile. "I'm still running this company. Last I checked, no one had taken my chair." "Of course," Helen replied, her voice smooth. "This is just long-term planning. In case of unexpected transitions." Benjamin didn't respond, but his hand trembled as he reached for a glass of water. He missed the edge of the glass the first time. No one laughed. No one said a word. Dr. Clark stood from her seat, calm, collected. "Mr. Easton," she said with quiet authority, "I've reviewed a concerning series of observations related to your health, symptoms that should not be dismissed." Benjamin turned slowly. "Excuse me. Your wife invited me here out of professional concern. I've been a neurologist for over 30 years. And I believe you're exhibiting signs of neurological deterioration that require immediate evaluation." His eyes widened. His voice cracked. "Are you kidding me?" He stood too fast. And then it happened. His knees buckled. He stumbled backward, tried to catch himself on the table, but missed. His body crashed into the chair behind him. He slumped, eyes wide but unfocused. The left side of his face drooped. His lips tried to form words, but they came out slurred, garbled syllables fighting to find shape. I. Rebecca rushed forward, checking his pulse. Dr. Clark was already pulling out her phone. "Call 911, she commanded. "Now. Suspected stroke. Immediate transport needed." Helen didn't flinch. She placed a firm hand on Benjamin's shoulder and whispered, "It's time to stop pretending." Back in the city, at Easton Biologics, Nora Campbell was mopping the lobby floor when she got the call. Helen's voice came through the line, low and trembling. "He collapsed. It happened." Nora closed her eyes. "He didn't recognize me this morning," she said softly. "He walked past me and called me the hallway girl." Silence. Then Helen said, "You were right. Every word. We're at the hospital now." Nora didn't ask to be updated. She simply said, "Don't let them delay his imaging. Demand CT and MRI. Stat." Helen didn't question her. She obeyed. Because at this point, she knew who she could trust. In the hospital, the scans confirmed everything Nora and Dr. Clark had suspected. A slow-growing cerebral aneurysm. Years in the making. Weeks from rupture. The symptoms had been written in his body for months. Clear, if you knew how to see. He had been walking toward disaster, cheered on by those who feared his wrath more than they cared for his life. While Benjamin underwent emergency surgery, another storm was building, not in his brain, but in the company he had built. On Monday morning, the boardroom was quiet. Too quiet. Helen arrived alone. She placed a thick folder on the table. Inside, Nora's full report. 47 pages. Time-stamped. Cross-referenced. Every symptom, every warning. Every moment that had been ignored. Every email where executives laughed her off. Every memo suggesting she be fired for boundary violations. The directors' faces drained of color. Ignoring a cleaning staffer's delusions is not the same as negligence, Jared Kim tried. Helen stared at him. She's not a delusional staffer. She's a trained nurse with 18 years of field experience and an unbroken oath to save lives. She opened the final page. And she did. The room fell silent. For the first time in years, they weren't afraid of Benjamin. They were afraid of the truth. At the hospital, Benjamin opened his eyes. The lights were harsh. The pain was deep. His voice barely above a whisper. Where is she? Helen leaned close. Rest. You've just come out of surgery. No, he croaked. The cleaner. The nurse. She's waiting outside, Helen whispered. She's been here for 7 hours. He closed his eyes, and tears slid down the sides of his face. She tried to warn me. Yes, Helen said. She did. When Nora entered the room, she stood at a respectful distance. Her hands were folded. Her expression calm. Benjamin turned his head, slowly, fighting weakness. His lips trembled again, not from illness this time, but from something unfamiliar. Humility. You saved me, he said. I tried to, she replied. He looked away. I'm sorry. She nodded once. Not for me. For you. A long silence passed between them. Then she said, softly, I didn't save you because you deserved it. I saved you because some of us still believe in the oath, even when no one believes in us. And for the first time in a long time, Benjamin Easton had no words left. Only silence. And in that silence, for once, he listened. News travels fast inside a corporate tower. But shame travels faster. By Tuesday morning, whispers had already begun to echo through the 42nd floor of Easton Biologics. Not about Benjamin Easton's condition, but about who had seen it coming. And who hadn't. And who had tried to silence her. It started with one intern who overheard the boardroom meeting. Then a tech assistant who saw Helen Easton carrying a copy of a report, 47 pages long, unmarked, with clinical handwriting in the margins. By midweek, someone had leaked a PDF online. The title page read, Observed Neurological Decline, Preliminary Report, Internal Concern, Confidential. Author, N. Campbell. Date range, August 2nd to August 18th. Inside, time-stamped observations. Progression patterns. Differential diagnostic possibilities. Clear clinical urgency. Within 48 hours, the document had gone viral. The janitor who saved the CEO. She warned them, and they mocked her. 47 pages of ignored evidence. Every business podcast, ethics panel, and think tank had something to say. And then came the internal leaks. Audio clips of executives joking about the nurse with a mop. Emails dismissing her concerns as overreach. A memo calling for her termination for unauthorized surveillance of executive staff. Public pressure exploded. Easton Biologics stock plummeted by $300 million in 3 days. News anchors called it the arrogance epidemic. The company issued a statement praising the courage and foresight of one of our most dedicated staff members. But by then, the world already knew her name. Nora Campbell declined every interview request, every offer, every check. Producers offered 6 figures for her story. Magazines offered covers. She refused them all. She had one response, and she only gave it once. "This isn't a story. It's a lesson. And the moment I sell it, they'll stop listening." Instead, she went back to work. Back to the office. Back to the same hallways where people had once walked past her without looking. Now, they stood when she entered the room. At the hospital, Benjamin was recovering slowly. His speech was returning, but his voice remained quiet. He was surrounded by doctors and specialists, but the one he wanted to see, still, was Nora. Helen visited every day, and she brought with her news from the outside. Not the financial damage, the social damage, reputation, trust, accountability. Benjamin listened in silence. His hands trembled slightly, but not from disease. From something else. Recognition. That Thursday, he asked for a pen. He wanted to write to Nora. Helen handed him a notebook. He wrote for 2 hours, then crossed everything out. "I want to tell her something she doesn't already know," he said. "She already knows everything," Helen replied. "What she needs to see is if you've learned it." By the following week, Nora had returned to her job. Not because she had to. Because she chose to. She wasn't the same woman who had been laughed at in the boardroom. She wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She was there because people needed to see her. In her uniform. Still cleaning. Still calm. Still watching. Not diminished, but elevated. Because her worth was never tied to the title. In a private board meeting, Helen Easton handed in her resignation from the Easton Biologics Board of Advisors. She stood at the head of the table as she addressed the remaining executives. "You chose silence over science, pride over precision, reputation over reality." She turned to Jared Kim. "You wanted to fire the one person who tried to save my husband's life. You don't get to lead this company anymore." Jared didn't object. He didn't even look up. By Friday, 2 directors had resigned. A third was terminated. Helen, now free from the corporate leash, made her next move. And she made it with Nora. Together, they met with Dr. Mariah Clark and outlined a plan, a new foundation. Not in Benjamin's name. Not in Helen's. Not even in Nora's. But in the name of clinical equity. Access. Observation. Respect. It would start with one clinic, serving uninsured patients from marginalized communities. A place where young nurses and doctors would be trained not just in protocols, but in perception. And it would be led by someone who had mastered both. In a quiet meeting room at the hospital, Benjamin sat in a wheelchair, facing Nora. His face was thinner now. His eyes clearer. "I've spent my life building an empire," he said slowly. "But I couldn't even see the signs in my own body." Nora didn't speak. "I hurt you. Not just with words. With everything I represented. I don't expect forgiveness." She finally answered. "You're not here for forgiveness." He nodded. "I'm here to start over." "No one starts over," she said. "We just move forward differently." When she left the room, a nurse stopped her. "He wrote something for you," she said, handing over a folded piece of paper. Inside, Benjamin had written a single sentence. "The life I thought I owned was only saved because someone refused to let it be thrown away." Nora folded the note, put it in her pocket, and walked down the hall, straight, strong, silent. Because the tremors may have started in Benjamin. But the shockwave had reached far beyond him. And now, everything was shifting. In the months that followed, Easton Biologics tried to rebuild. The company released statements, rebranded its image, reorganized its leadership team. They offered Nora Campbell a public apology. She declined it. They offered her a settlement. She refused that too. Because Nora understood something they hadn't yet grasped. You don't fix a system by cutting a check. You fix it by replacing the foundation. So while they scrambled to restore their market value, Nora, Helen, and Dr. Mariah Clark quietly built something else. Something that couldn't be shaken by scandal. The Campbell Initiative for Clinical Equity was born in a modest brownstone on the edge of Harlem. No marble floors. No sleek elevators. No PR campaign. Just purpose. The clinic opened with 10 beds, 3 examination rooms, and a waiting area that Nora insisted be painted warm yellow. "It's not much," Mariah said on opening day. Nora looked around. "It's more than enough to begin." They offered free medical screenings, education on patient advocacy, mentorship programs for students of color entering the medical field, and a training course simply titled, "How to See What Others Don't." That course was Nora's. She taught not from textbooks, but from lived truth. She stood before students, future doctors, nurses, administrators, and said things they'd never heard in their institutions. Your white coat doesn't make you better. Your stethoscope doesn't make you wise. The moment you stop observing the whole person is the moment you stop practicing medicine. Within 6 months, the waiting list to join the clinic's fellowship program tripled. Medical schools from across the country began to ask Nora for speaking engagements. She refused most. "I'm not here to speak," she said. "I'm here to serve." Still, her words traveled. Students printed quotes from her lectures and taped them to their dorm walls. Humility saves more lives than ego ever will. Observation is a form of compassion. If they won't see you, see them anyway. Benjamin Easton remained out of the spotlight. He no longer occupied boardrooms. He no longer gave speeches. He walked with a cane now, slight limp on the left. His speech was slower, but clearer. And his vision, finally, was focused. He reached out once more to Nora, offering to support the initiative. She responded with a list. Not of needs. Of communities. South Bronx. Baltimore. Milwaukee. South Central LA. Open them, she wrote. No names. No photos. Just action. He complied. Over the next year, 4 new clinics opened across the country, each anonymous, each built with a quiet donation. Each one carrying the same mission. And in every single one, near the front door, hung the same framed plaque. In honor of those who once went unseen. One afternoon, Benjamin visited the Harlem clinic in person. He came alone, without announcement, wearing a plain coat, no entourage. He sat in the waiting room beside a teenage boy and an elderly woman. He watched. He listened. He waited. Eventually, Nora appeared, clipboard in hand, walking with the same calm presence she always carried. She saw him. Didn't smile. Didn't pause. Just nodded once, and kept moving. He didn't follow. He didn't ask for a conversation. He had already received one, long ago, when she chose to save him without condition. Months later, Nora received a package. No note. Just a sealed journal. Inside were handwritten pages. Benjamin's writing, slow, uneven, but deeply intentional. It wasn't an apology. It was a reflection. A full account of his recovery, his regrets, and his realization. My hands shook. My world shrank. But I finally understand what you saw before anyone else did. Not the disease. The denial. And in saving me, you gave me the chance to learn how to finally see. Nora closed the journal and placed it on her bookshelf. Next to a framed photo of her in her janitor uniform, mop in hand, eyes sharp, expression steady. A photo taken by someone she never found out the name of. Someone who, like her, had been watching. Because that was the legacy now. Not a fall from grace. Not a woman who rose from the ashes. But a reminder that the people we overlook often hold the answers we're too proud to hear. And if we're lucky, if we're truly lucky, they'll choose to save us anyway. It was a cold spring evening in Washington, D.C. The auditorium of the National Health Equity Forum was filled to capacity. Doctors, nurses, policymakers, students, journalists. The kind of people who had never noticed women like Nora Campbell. But tonight, they were all here for her. At the center of the stage, under the soft gold lighting, stood a single podium. No banners. No grand introduction. Just a woman in a dark blue suit, her shoulders straight, her eyes calm. When she stepped into the light, the room fell silent. And Nora Campbell began to speak. For 15 years, I wore a nurse's uniform. For 5, I wore a janitor's. And for most of that time, I was treated as if I was nothing at all. Not because I lacked knowledge, but because I lacked position. Because I didn't sit in the meetings. Because I didn't have a title worth printing on a door. But I watched. And I listened. And when the time came, I acted. Not because I wanted to be seen, but because someone had to. She paused. The room held its breath. They told me to stay in my place. But what they never understood was, my place has always been where lives are saved. Even when no one is looking. Even when no one is listening. A single tear rolled down the cheek of a young nurse in the front row. A medical student in the back wiped his glasses, pretending not to cry. Nora continued. We live in a world that rewards arrogance more than observation. We hire degrees instead of minds. We promote volume over wisdom. And then we wonder why we miss the signs. Why patients go unheard. Why lives are lost in the silence. She stepped slightly forward. Her voice deepened, not louder, but stronger. I was told I was just a cleaner. And for years, I let them believe that. Because I didn't need their belief to do what was right. I only needed my own conviction. And when that conviction was tested, I didn't speak louder. I acted clearer. And the man who mocked me for cleaning his floor? He's alive today. Not because of his power, but because I refused to let mine be wasted. The room erupted in applause. But Nora held up one hand. Not yet. I did not save him for praise or attention. I saved him because I swore an oath. Not one I recited at a graduation ceremony. But the one I made the day I decided I'd never let someone die because the world couldn't see who I really was. Now, the applause returned, this time, unstoppable. Standing. Rising. Surging. 8 minutes of it. Benjamin Easton watched from the side wing, leaning quietly on his cane. He didn't try to speak. He just clapped. And wept. Weeks later, at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, a new exhibit was unveiled. A single janitor's uniform, carefully pressed and mounted behind glass. Beside it, a simple placard. the uniform worn by Nora Campbell, a woman who saved lives when no one thought she could. The final chapter came quietly. Nora declined positions at hospitals. She declined titles. Instead, she focused on what she had always done best. She built people. She taught. She mentored. She stood beside the invisible until they became undeniable. And if you walked past her on the street, you might never know who she was. You might think she was just another woman in a quiet coat, carrying groceries or helping someone cross the street. But if you looked closely, you'd see something in her eyes. A stillness, a strength, the kind that doesn't need to be seen, because it already changed everything. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is not destroying someone who underestimated you, but saving them anyway, and walking away knowing you never needed their approval to be extraordinary.